Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is INX Prime Live. Remember, we are on your screens every single Monday to Friday between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Now, Britain's Foreign Secretary David Lammy on Monday announced that the UK will be suspending about 30 out of the 350 arms export licenses to Israel. Now, the move will affect equipment such as parts for fighter jets, helicopters, as well as drones. We are seeing Amnesty International UK saying that the suspension is too limited, and other rights groups have welcomed the step up, calling it cautious but not good enough. Now, what is the significance of this decision, and what does it say about the amount of pressure placed on Western governments to review their support for Israel? Now, to have that conversation and that question, we are going to be chatting to Abida Adams, who is actually from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and she joins me now for her reflections on this new development. Assalamu alaikum, Abida. Thank you so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum salam, and thanks for having us.
No, it's such a pleasure chatting to you as well. I know that this is such an important conversation, to see the UK come out and do this. It is quite significant, but I want to chat about how. Now, how significant is this move by the UK? We know that it is a government that has actually been quite vocal about its support for Israel since the Gaza war actually began in October.
Yeah, I think what is actually significant is that despite, if we think there are 350 different licenses, arms exporting licenses that the UK have with Israel, and they've only suspended 30. So I think we should also just be saying that we are cautiously optimistic. I think every action like this is in the interest of the safety and the security of the Palestinian people. So as much as we welcome this, we think, it's actually not enough. We need we need a complete arms embargo on the state of Israel. And so as Palestinian solidarity activists and campaigning around issues around arms embargo, trade embargo, sanctions, divestments, and boycotts, of course, we welcome these actions because we believe this is because of the work and the pressure that ordinary people, be it in the UK, be it in the US, be it in Europe or South Africa, in terms of our campaign and our ongoing campaigning for solidarity work with the people of Palestine. But unfortunately, it's not enough. If you consider it's only about 8% of the licenses. And I just read up something saying one of the things, I think the fighter jets, I think it's F-35. So that licensing, for example, has not been suspended. And also the UK, the Labour-led UK government, they're making it very, very clear that this is not an arms embargo against the state of Israel. And that is what we need, not just from the UK, but from all the international community. We need a complete isolation of the Zionist state of Israel.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's also another conversation to have, and I'm looking at the statement actually from the Foreign Secretary. It's quite an interesting statement. You also start to question, in terms of legislation and also the kind of ability or flexibility these agreements have when it comes to suspensions or cancellations. I think that's also another conversation. But I wanted to know, in terms of your opinion, do you think that Western governments are finally finding the courage to actually tell Israel that they cannot continue this war in Gaza unchecked, as they have done so, for the last 11 months, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But I also, while I'm saying that, I don't think that, we should lose any hope, because I think it's very important that the work that we are doing on the ground to put pressure on Western governments, even our own South African government, for example, to hold them to account in terms of their actions and that kind of thing. I do believe that, for example, if you look at the contradictions and the hypocrisy, for example, the same time, if you look at the US and the Secretary of State, they're having they are part of the whole ceasefire agreements, but at the very same time, then they just grant more and more 20 billion and God knows how much millions and millions of rands in arms and material support they've given to the Israelis. And if we also take that into consideration, that the Palestinian people don't even have a standing force, they don't have an army, but I think also that what is important to note is that, the arms industry, So for them, it doesn't really matter because they are making profit at the expense of Palestinian lives. I mean, we've had more than 40,000 lives lost, so many young children think. So we do need a complete and full international arms embargo. And what the UK is doing is very little. I mean, I think it's very insignificant, but we don't want to discard it completely.
No, without a doubt. I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
just
we
looking.
should actually just campaign for more and more actions and more embargoes and a significant arms embargo internationally.
Yeah, it's important. It's very, very important, and hopefully we do see more of these embargoes coming into place. I mean,
Mm.
I'm looking at some of the comments we also mentioned in terms of the intro, and we look at platforms and organizations like Amnesty International, who play such an important role in society as well. Also, other anti-arms trade organizations have come out to say that it's not enough and that there are still loopholes, for Israel to continue, doing exactly what they're currently doing. What's your opinion on that? And also, how do we rectify that in the long term?
Well, absolutely. We all know it's not enough. And I mean, like, it's like, also during apartheid years, you always have these sanctions and embargo busting entities. So we believe this is what is happening. So as long as there isn't, I believe that as long as if we don't have an international arms embargo, not piecemeal things, and because I think and it shouldn't just be limited to an arms embargo, any material support, even if it's just ordinary trade or whatever with the state of Israel, is supporting the war effort, is supporting the genocide against the Palestinian people. So for us, it would be a complete isolation of the state of Israel. That is the only way we are going to end this genocide. We are going to end this Holocaust that is happening at the moment against the Palestinian people. So we can't have this piecemeal things. I mean, we know that it can be effective. We've seen in terms of our South African history during apartheid. South Africa was completely isolated. Sports boycotts, economic boycotts, cultural boycotts, arms embargoes, trade embargoes, and that is what we need. And we also need our South African government to lead with it, because as much as South Africa has taken Israel to the ICJ, they have not spoken out or led in terms of any trade sanctions and trade embargoes, etc. So we do need the international community to do that. And international organizations like Amnesty International, etc., they're absolutely correct in saying, this is not enough. We
Yeah.
need more action. We need more sanctions. We need more embargoes against the state of Israel.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of public support for the banning of Israel, at, for example, FIFA tournaments. We've seen them actually put an application into UEFA to move them into another, organization or region, because they don't want them to be part of UEFA or the European Union anymore. We've seen a lot of these happening. I mean, even in terms of the Olympics, we've seen a huge outcry to ban them from that. So we're seeing it in a sporting perspective. I think we're not seeing it enough in terms of business, without a doubt, and stopping these type of transactions in the US and in
Absolutely.
the UK and many other places as well. I just want to go back to what the Foreign Minister David Lammy actually said from the UK. Now, he says that the suspension of the licenses will not actually amount to an arms embargo, like we did mention. But do you think that the country could still avoid its complicity should the ICJ indict Israel for war crimes?
Look, I mean, I'm not a professional an expert on international law, but I mean, my opinion is that every country, including the UK, that Israel needs to be indicted, but also those countries who's complicit in aiding and abetting them. So, I mean, like the UK, whether it was the Tories or the Labour government, they are very clear in terms of their support for the Israeli government and the occupation of Palestine. So any country, whether it is in a small way, in a significant way, especially if you look at in terms of the US, they should also be charged with being guilty of war crimes. I mean, that is the thing. Even if we consider now, I mean, there are different interpretations, for example, on the advisory opinion of the ICJ, but it's very clear that any entity or country or person who supports Israel should be charged, and they should be charged also with being guilty of war crimes. That is our position. But unfortunately, we know that in terms of the balance of forces, in terms of the international community and international, these multilateral institutions, we see how things are moving, sometimes at a very slow pace. There are a number of cases, for example, at the International Criminal Court by the Palestinian people as well, and that has been taking years and years. So, we don't have much faith and hope in these multilateral institutions. But of course, our wish is for that we can have a situation that Israel is charged with war crimes, but also that we have an immediate ceasefire and that we know that we have unconditional humanitarian aid for the Palestinian people. That, of course, it's absolutely critical, and we need that to happen sooner rather than later.
Without a doubt, I completely agree with that. And we are getting a lot of comments and questions coming in from social media. I mean, we're seeing some comments as well. Nadim was saying, he feels like the social media and the exposure that comes from social media through TikTok and Instagram has actually really allowed the general public to understand how bad things actually are and what actually is taking place away from the agendas that your mainstream media has. I mean, we're also getting comments from Sabrina. Sabrina was saying that all these protests, for example, don't seem to be doing such a good job. Now we're getting conflicting comments here where some people feel like there's been a lot of effectiveness and efficiency when it comes to the general public getting involved, and other people feel like it hasn't really done what it needed to do. I wanted to get your opinion on it. What role have international protests against Israel's genocide by millions in the Western countries in particular who are demanding an end to this war? What impact do you think they've actually played?
Look, I think it's played a significant impact, especially since 7th of October. I mean, definitely in terms of, we are not talking, I think we need to make a distinction between the governments and the people of the different countries, especially if you look, for example, at a lot of European countries, at the UK and even at the USA. Their government policy is very pro-Israel. But I think if you look at the numbers of people that are supporting these international solidarity events, it's really important. And I'm sure people are also feeling frustrated because, look, some of us saying that it's 11 months, but we do know that it's, of course, 76 years. There are some of us who've been solidarity activists and campaigning around the Palestinian issue for years and years and years, and it's not an easy fight. And I don't think that we should lose patience. Always the comments that we hear from the people from Palestine, whether it's via social media, when they can be in contact with us, or when they come here and we talk to them, or whatever way we connect, they do appreciate and support the solidarity actions of the international community. So we shouldn't stop. Even the boycotts, divestments, and sanctions campaigns, these things takes time, but we have made some significant gains over the time. If you also think what the students have been done in the US, quite a number of universities, for example, has decided to no longer invest. They've withdrawn. They've divested from any things related to Israel, and then we shouldn't lose hope. And we shouldn't lose patience. We are fighting an international war machinery. The international narrative is very pro-Israel and is painting Israel in a very positive picture. But we are changing that on a daily basis, and we are winning people over on a daily basis. The same thing, if we take into account our own history, there was also sentiment then that, we would never be able to overcome apartheid in South Africa, and we did. And so it is possible, and we just need to continue in terms of being committed and believing that, this is possible. And definitely the tide is turning. It's definitely turning. And we will not stop until we have reached our target, which is the complete liberation of the Palestinian people and their right to self-determination and their right to exist.
That's brilliant. Again, Abida, thank you so much for having this conversation with us tonight. And thank you again for joining us here on INX Prime Live.
Shukran for having me.
That's only a pleasure, guys. That is Abida Adams, who is actually from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. just sharing with us some of her views when it comes to this very recent statement by the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who indicated that about 30 out of the 350 arms deals would actually be suspended to Israel. And that's obviously in this new turn by a lot of your Western countries who are starting to now reduce their support for Israel and also trying to find a better solution for this issue in particular.